Yo, what up? It's Max. You're listening to Streaming Cassettes, Wingman of the Year. As always, hold down the spot. And actually got to our left, the wonderful, dude, the locks, impressive, Jordy The Blond.
Yo, how are you? I'm Jordy The Blond. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it's a pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm enjoying the warmth of LA. I just got back from New York recently because I'm a vaccinista, so I'm allowed to travel.
Yes.
I just got back from New York, and like it was funny. The moment I landed, there was like 3 inches of snow. I was like, dude, come on. So I'm enjoying the warmth right now.
Oh, the weather over in our neck of the woods has been rough the last couple weeks.
Yeah. I as soon as it was the day I was leaving, it hit like 70, and I was like, really? Come on, you got to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Did me
No,
dirty.
it's wild, but I'm jealous of that LA weather out there. At least like I feel like mid-July when you guys started having to deal with the forest fires and like 100-degree days like in a row, that's not fun. But like January to May sounds pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there's a funny thing I tell people, like especially when I'm talking with people back home. They're like, man, it's like so beautiful. I'm like, yeah, it's gorgeous. But there's this weird thing that happens usually like when the Santa Ana winds happens, which is where all the fires come from. They're like are walking into a grocery store and they'll be like, hey, how's it going? Y'all, same old thing. And it's like the apocalypse is happening like 2 miles over. And it's they talk about it like we talk about snow. So it's so weird.
Right. It's like casual, like, yeah, just burning inferno. No big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. No big deal.
Yeah.
It happens every year.
Well, awesome. Let's kind of dive into, we're going to dive into the whole time, but let's kind of do this.
Yeah.
So obviously, Jordy, that's your, do you go by Jordan formally? Jordy, what's your preference?
Weirdly, so everybody has called me Jordy or, all my life. And Jordy The Blond actually comes from like, an old union thing. Like when I worked in New York City at the union, Local 1, shout out.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, oh yeah, you got to go talk with Jordy The Blond. You know what I mean? Because it was pretty obvious. I was like one of the only blonde dudes there. So like everybody knew who I was as Jordy The Blond. But everybody calls me Jordy. That has always been a nickname. But I professionally, I'll introduce myself as Jordan. Like if I'm working as an engineer or something like that, I'm like, hi, I'm Jordan. I'm not gonna like roll up to a studio and be like, yo, I'm Jordy The Blond. Well, it's happened before. Like I just did a gig. I just did a gig for Ellen, and it was Hunter Hayes.
Yes.
I think I'm allowed to say that now.
Oh, plug away.
Well, I just worked with Hunter Hayes. We recorded him for the Ellen show, and they like got my emails mixed up because the person I was working with, Alex, fantastic producer, vocal engineer, Alex Flag Daddy, another shout out. He helped me on a lot of my music. He sent me like a gear list to my artist email, Jordy The Blond at Gmail.
Mm-hmm.
And the person he forwarded it to his like manager, and she was like, Jordy The Blond, huh? Like, yep.
That's me.
She was cool about it. She asked about it later, and I was like, yeah, it's an artist thing. I'm not gonna try and it's unprofessional to plug yourself when you're in those settings, but
right.
It was a funny situation.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes sense. And I thought it was funny. I talked to Toronto before you hopped on, and then I'll dive more into your stuff. But I said, I think I saw in his story he was on Ellen and for Hunter Hayes. And I was saying how like, oh yeah, that my me and my wife's song was like wedding song was Wanted. So it's just really funny. Like, oh yeah, small world universe,
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool.
Yeah. So obviously you do kind of like different stuff in production, but kind of tell people more about what you do musically for yourself, like overall.
Sure. Well, I started out in punk music, like pop punk and stuff, and had to learn how to do everything, like from running a board to engineering and mixing my own stuff. I mean, for years it was terrible, and then I started getting good at it. Totally stole a lot of stuff from other people. I mean, but that's the game, you got to learn.
Yeah.
So like I treated Logic Pro as like not only a recording interface and like a DAW, but I treated it like an instrument, kind of like Ableton. So weirdly, all of the aspects of Ableton that draws musicians to it, I like created my own way of using Logic that worked in that way. So I didn't have to use MainStage or get Ableton to do it. I was just like, I jury rigged it, So I would do that, and then I'd also like mix it as I went, and I got better and better at it, and slowly that became my career. So I engineer live. So I've been on tour with a bunch of artists. I I could go on for days about that. I'm sure we'll get to it. And then like, because of that, I've used that experience to kind of build my show. So it's almost like a sound man's dream to have like a sound guy on stage. So I'll roll up with all my own gear, have everything already preset. And I'm like, all you really have to do is just like babysit the board, you know?
Mhm.
So like there's that aspect as like a sound nerd. Excuse me.
Oh, you're good.
And then beyond that, as like a producer, I mean, I'm trying to think of how to adequately say, because I'm sure everybody has their own way of doing it, but I tend to usually find stuff because I have synesthesia. So like, you know, that thing where you can like feel color with music.
Mhm.
I have that for like a tactile thing.
Okay.
So like I literally feel music. And it, so like I'll hear something or I'll feel it, like I'll get a synth and get like a feel or a vibe, a lot of people call it, and I just kind of like build everything off of that. Um, and yeah, and then I just have a bunch of stories, and obviously I want to be heard, so I talk way too much, and I talk way too much over my music, and that's kind of how it works.
That's great. No, that's so cool. So you kind of, if I'm hearing this right, you sort of went in as like through the pop punk, more on that production end, and then you decided to say, "Hey, let me dabble in my own sound," kind of.
Yeah, I mean, we were a very cohesive band. Like my original pop punk band is called Atticus Finch. We're still going. We still like we just did a couple of tours. Like literally right as COVID started is when we ended our east, like I almost said East Coast tour, but it was only like across New York in the Northeast.
Yeah.
But like we all kind of come in with songs that are kind of pre-built, and we all just like, you know, pick away at them and make them slightly different and like produce our own stuff with each other. Um, so like I already had a lot of freedom. I had a lot of freedom in that. And then obviously like we're a pop punk band, we're not going to roll up with like hip hop or pop or anything like that.
Mhm.
But I just started going my own way. I've always been making music like this. Kind of kept it to myself because it's like, you know, I grew up in the sticks. I grew up in Herkimer, New York, which is like
Okay.
tiny, dude. Like
Yeah.
if anybody knows where Utica is, I'd be surprised. We're even like
Oh yeah.
smaller than that. Yeah. So yeah, it's
518.
five. Oh, that's right. It's 518. That's right.
Yes. Yes.
315, baby.
You have that too. Yeah.
It's the best pizza in the game. So like, you know, I've always been kind of doing my own thing, but then I just decided to start putting it out. And especially with the connections and all of the things that I've learned in the past couple of years, like actively working in, you know, the industry, not just being a gigging corporate sound guy or a gigging sound dude. Like I have gotten more and more experience as a producer, an engineer, songwriter, working on some songs with other people and so on and so forth. So then I just decided to like, might as well do my thing.
Right. That's awesome. I'm gonna yeah, let me tackle into some of your solo stuff here. And then obviously we'll go into your production as well.
Sure.
So I listened to your latest EP, Sarcastically Righteous. Now, is that like your first legit EP, or have you had music out previously before then, before I dive further in that EP?
That is technically my only thing that I've put out.
Okay.
I mean, I've with Atticus Finch, we have tons of music out.
Right, okay.
Because we've been together for God knows how long. Like we were 15 when we started, I think. So,
Oh
you
wow,
know,
okay.
yeah, it's almost 15 years now.
Nice.
But this is my first time with my own stuff, my own thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I really like the sound of it. Some of the tracks that I really dug was like Tensions. I love the way Time Zones was like arranged. Really cool. And then
Thank you.
one that it was in shuffle and I really liked was IG. That was another cool one also.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite. Yeah, so Tension, this is a wild fact. Tension was recorded. So I work with Max Frost, and
Mhm.
at the time he was on a label. He was on Atlantic, so we were working with them closely for tours and everything like that. And then he has recently gone independent. I think I'm allowed to say that. Well, either way. And let me get in trouble. He went independent, and because like we became pretty good friends on the road, he helped co-produce that song. Now the crazy thing is he's really close with Chris Bosh, like the NBA superstar.
Yeah.
So we
Wow.
recorded that at Chris Bosh's mansion in the Palisades.
No shit. Wow.
Yeah. Shout out Chris. Thank you.
Yes. Buckets.
Daddy Jack Records, I think is his label now. So yeah, it was yeah, buckets. Yeah. It's just weird because it's like, meeting him and Adrian, his wife, his kids, like they're such wonderful people. And like I kind of knew going in that they were like NBA, he was an NBA superstar or whatever and all that, but like meeting him and hanging out with them the little bit that I have, they're some of the most chill and down to earth people. So like they're so and Chris is so heavily into music now, and he's producing, and he learned so
Wow.
much so fast, and he's very good now, like very good. How some people get started and it's like, yeah, it's pretty good. Like this dude is very good, and he did it quickly.
Yeah,
So
because
yeah,
you've been out of the league for a few years, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
not too long. Yeah.
I never
But
knew he was doing that. That's amazing.
yeah, I'm fairly certain it's Daddy Jack Records. If you look it up, you'll find it everywhere.
Yep.
It's really impressive what he's done in such a short amount of time.
Wow.
He's a really nice dude. Shout out. But yeah, so I recorded that at his place with Frost. It started out like full band. It wasn't going to be like a pop song. It was supposed to be almost like this pop punk, like aggressive pop. And then we slowly turned it into like this rock and roll thing that like is more pop. But I have a live version coming out soon that's more rock and roll. Like one of the things my friends told me, he's like, because I showed him a lot of the stuff. It's Lucky, and his name is Listen to Lucky online. He's a great musician. Worked with him a bunch of times. We actually had some EPs back in the day that I thought were like dope. I saw like you put them on. I'm like, damn, how did I come up with that shit? Not to get gas
sick.
myself up, but but he called me neo rock and roll, and I really dig that because I don't feel like pop. I don't feel like hip hop. And then when because I built the show, I have yet to do the show yet, but soon. It's rock and roll. It's not pop music. Like, yeah, there's a track here and there, but like you heard on Time Zones, it's rock, it's so when you hear Tension, all of a sudden you have like a full drum kit and an insane solo in it and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I'm just saying you'll see soon. I'm putting it out. I'm just sitting on it. I'm like, I don't know. I got to put it out someday. I will.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have so much you're juggling, so it makes sense to be like, okay, this is when I want to drop it, especially when it's like something from the heart, like you personally.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to say is I'm juggling a lot because, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but COVID kind of like threw a wrench into things. I already kind of planned on putting out music at some point, but this allowed me to really focus on it. And then it switched my career from being mostly live engineering to a lot of like studio engineering and producing, which is it's what I want. That's what I would rather do. I love live engineering. I will gladly do it for a living. But because of that, it kind of like pushed me into doing this. And another thing with it, another aspect that people don't really see, and I'm not saying that, you need to respect it because I kind of don't want people to focus on all of the work that goes into it. I want you to just enjoy the music. But not only am I tracking it and writing it, I'm mixing it, I'm producing it out. I actually had somebody else master it, Mike Tripoli, fantastic engineer. But I'm also doing all the promo. I'm doing all the video. I'm creating all the marketing stuff that you see, all the canvases I made. Like I luckily my hobby is video editing. Otherwise, like I feel bad for all these other artists because then they have to like pay somebody to do that. And it's such a crazy competition that like you're bleeding money as a musician. And that's what you have to do to try and get your music out there.
Right.
Like I made the entirety of the lyric video for Tension, did the lyric video for IG, which I did literally entirely in Instagram. And the funny thing is because of the way it was like nerfed on social media, like it got deleted several times off IG and Facebook.
Oh,
It's
wow.
got like it's got like a tenth of the original views from Tension. So it's like this game of trying to get people to watch and keeping them entertained while also trying to keep your own sanity, because you start to compare yourself. And that's basically what IG was about, is you shouldn't compare yourself to other people, but that's the only way for you to act like, adequately understand the metrics of what you're putting out. That was a lot of information. Sorry.
No, we love these type of I love this type of conversation. So it's really interesting. Plus, like I told you a little pre-interview, having a younger brother that's like kind of in the world, I feel like you may have more tread on the tires, but he's getting there. It's time staking the amount of times you're correcting voice pitch and stuff. And I'll be on FaceTime and I'll listen to him for hours, same thing over and over. And I can imagine you're doing the same exact stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, I put in for this EP, I put in 40-hour weeks minimum for about, from, I want to say May, about 5 months. So like that's 40 hours a week, including stuff that I would do for money. So like mixing and producing other bands, but I literally made it my full-time job, which is where it's unsustainable for other musicians. Which is like why I think it's very important to support musicians that will put something out every once in a while. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can tell who has the financial backing and who doesn't, and who's doing it out of the love. Not saying that people who have money don't have the love for it. That's not what I'm saying at all. But,
right.
But then there's people who like, for example, like I came into this world, I got with close to nothing. So I'm working full time while trying to work my music full time. And you can kind of tell based on how people are posting, what they do, how they talk about their music. And I think that those people really need to be like, have a light shined on them, shined on them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're like the workhorses that do it out of love. So
right.
I had the extra time. So it's not like I'm super special with it, but like there's other people that I know who have been doing this stuff for close to a decade. And they just, even if nobody's listening, they just still put it out. And that is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, just the fact that you did the follow through. You actually put out art and not said, no, I can't do it. No one gives a shit. Like all those things that you fight yourself in your head every single day.
Yeah. And that's a real thing, because IG was my favorite. And then having that come out to, I mean, that's the thing, is like, I created the standard. I did this to myself, where I put the standard in my head, like it was a flop, but I'm like, who cares? Because the point wasn't to get attention. And then I had to like walk myself backward from my thinking that I got so invested in, it's like you easily forget, because of the rat race and because of like social media in general, just going on it. We innately as humans will start to compare each other. So you like compare yourself to other people when you really shouldn't, because it's about your art. Like if there is an artist listening to this that like is dealing with that right now, none of that shit matters, dude. None of that matters. All that matters is that you say what you need to say. And if nobody listens, it doesn't matter. You put it in a physical form. And that's something that most people cannot say.
Yeah. Clip that. That's great. I love that. When we touch, this is kind of in line with the EP and what you were talking about with your sound, how it kind of, is on the line between like rock and pop, at least from what you came off with the EP. I feel like you're almost in a pocket right now that's actually good in the music industry, because I feel like right now you have like this renaissance of like 2000 pop punk sampling and sounds. Obviously, probably the most obvious one off the top of my head is Tickets to My Downfall, MGK, but there's also rappers doing it too, like Juice WRLD was. How do you feel about your sound overall and kind of like this trend? Is it something that you feel could stay around for a little bit? Or is it more of like a 1-2 year phase?
Well, first of all, I told you guys, I tell people this all the time, that it's pop punk is like the thing right now. I think it might be around for a little bit. So like I worked with a band called Royal and the Serpent, and when we were in rehearsals, it was Alex Flagstaff was the producer I mentioned. He was the MD, so the music director. He was helping them like craft and create their show. and James Prinzi on drums, great drummer. They kind of twisted it and turned it into like a heavier rock thing. And Royal, she was all about it. She's like, oh, this is perfect. Let's try this. Let's do this. And it became more and more rock and more pop punk and more punk. I think they even covered like a Panic at the Disco song. I can't remember.
Oh wow,
But
okay.
that's like the thing right now. And part of me, as somebody who's been doing pop punk for like 15 years, I started gatekeeping, which is like, you should never do that. But I started being like, oh, we've been around for like 15 years and nobody cared. Like it, it like was a thing in the back of my head that like obviously I had control over. And I'm like, it's not really not like that. But I'm just happy that this music is starting to hit the light of day. But it can also kind of be like, yeah, well, what about like, all those bands that we grew up on? So then that gets me into the thinking of that's why it's coming back. Like, you remember a couple years ago, like a friend of mine worked on a song with Rihanna. I'm trying to think of the name of the song. Oh my God, it escapes me right now. But I think it's called Jump or something like that. And it's just like a sampling of tons of music from the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mhm.
This happens occasionally where you hear like a melody that's interpolated, which is like a new like version. It's not sampled, but it's like used.
Right.
Then you'll hear that from like different decades. Like you hear that in the 80s, you hear that in the 90s. Like Dua Lipa had that song that my friend Taylor worked on that was like straight up 80s sounding. And it
Oh, the track Physical?
yeah. It's straight 80s. Like
Mhm.
and it's an interpolation of physical, or something like that. I don't know all the details, and I'm not going to embarrass myself, but that's a very common thing. And I think that there's a psychological aspect to it because of that. Like that's because it's already familiar, it's easy to sell. And unfortunately, the music industry needs money, so they're going to put music out that sells. So with MGK kind of normalizing pop punk, and all the others kind of doing it, I think it's going to be a trend for the next couple of years. It will kind of go away and then we'll find something else. But I think it kind of flows in like 15 to like 20-year increments. Like we had The Starting Line and Hawthorne Heights and stuff like that in the 2000s, and we're hitting 2021. So it's about 20 years, about 15 years. So like 5-10 years ago, we were doing a lot of 90s stuff. That's when the mom jeans came back. And it's not like, it's weird because there's no way you can actually quantify it and follow it, but it's a thing.
No, you took the words out of my mouth. I feel like I've talked with friends and stuff that I feel like nostalgia is like, as far as peak nostalgia, is like in 20-year cycles. So like, I feel like we're around the same age. I'm 31, but in high school, I remember a lot of like 80s stuff was like kind of like that kind of, nostalgia. And then like you said, in the last 10 years, definitely 90s. And now you're in that early 2000s window. So it, from just a timeline standpoint, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, there's a lot of great melodic stuff they can tie in too, and it's kind of fresh because it hasn't been touched on in years.
Yeah. And it's an interpolation, if I remember correctly, depending on the deal, can be way more lucrative because of like a sample. You're sampling a master. You're sampling the recording of it, whereas an interpolation is you're sampling like the idea of it or the music. It works for everything. Like look at Space Jam. I was kind of stoked about Space Jam, but then I started watching the trailer again. I'm like, they had Droogs from A Clockwork Orange, and I'm like, bro, what are they doing in a Space Jam movie? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which is like, but that's like that thing. Like, I think that's why Marvel is so popular, because everybody has a favorite character, and that character like shows up in the movie somehow, or in the story. So it becomes almost like the shout out will sell the film to somebody else,
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
So as far as with that sound, do you feel like you just was sort of happenstance that the stuff you were putting out is similar to what's in the market, or is that something you were maybe pursuing kind of as you were in the creative process?
I wasn't really aiming for that sound.
Okay.
I think it just kind of came out naturally. I don't really aim to sound a certain way. Like while I'm creating the show, I do, but like on my next EP, it's done. The next EP is done. Right now, I'm just saving up to like make music videos and stuff because I think the best song I've written so far in my like entire life is going to be on this EP, and I just want to do it justice. It's called California, and it's hitting a store soon. Ugh. But um, I don't think I really went for that sound. It just kind of happened naturally because of all the music I've done over the years. But I'm trying to aim for something heavier. Like I want aggressive pop. I want rock and roll, you know, like I don't know if you ever heard the band Turbo Negro, but they're like huge in Europe. I mean, they're iconic, and they just like dance this line of like heavy punk, like they call themselves death punk, I think.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But they're rock and roll. They're just like feel good, fun time, and that's kind of what I'm aiming for. Like I want to make pop music that has like the heavy guitar and like just the groove of rock and roll. So that's what I'm going to aim for, at least. But
Right.
I think it's happening naturally, you know, like that's just what we do as musicians.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's kind of, I would assume most artists want to go in and do for themselves. Like I'm just doing it for what I feel and not for what maybe somebody's asking or,
Yeah.
you know, implying. So let's tackle this. You mentioned a song called California. You're out in LA now. How long have you been in LA
Yeah.
for?
I moved out to California about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Let me think. 4 years ago. It'll be 5 years next year. I said I have to do math like that. But yeah, I moved out here because I started working with a musical company as a sound person. Slowly made my way into more like rock and roll. So like in the musical world, they call, you know, anything that's like a band rock and roll, weirdly. So I slowly transitioned into that, and I actually was like about to move back to New York. I had some really big personal stuff happen. I was so done with California. Like I just wasn't with the people. Because I'm a New Yorker through and through, and I'm also from like the country. So like not only am I kind of like slightly country, but I also have that New York mentality of like I'm always right. And that doesn't bode well. Yeah, you get it. You know, you know, 518. But but that like kind of just made me want to move back. I was about to move into my cousin's place in Queens in the basement, and I met Max Frost, and he was looking for a sound guy, and like I went to meet him in LA and basically signed up to go on tour with him. And the crazy thing was like 2 weeks before we went out, he got the call that he was going to be opening for 21 Pilots.
Wow.
So went on tour with 21 Pilots. It was insane. That was like my first big tour. I was behind like a desk that cost like $130,000. And like the sound system alone was like a couple mil. So like it was unreal. It was definitely like a dream come true. And like because of that, he like got me to stay in California. So I stuck it out, and now I'm like, my personal stuff has been like figured out. I'm very happy. I feel like I'm in the right spot. And now like I'm trying to like help others find that wherever they are, I guess.
Wow.
So.
That's super cool. And so you were kind of talking about the New York part. Let me touch on that too. So you grew up in Herkimer, you said, right? Herkimer County area. Okay. Yeah. And so, but you also made something, you were also in New York City. Is that correct?
Yes. I lived in New York for a while. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So how was like that upbringing kind of, how that impact how you are today, maybe musically and just in general?
Well, I was very lucky. My family, like, and here's the thing is like when I was living there, things were great. You know, we all kind of complain because the Valley isn't it's like stuck in the 90s, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't really see from the point of view of somebody who was out here. So like moving to California, I realized what it was like, you know, like working on farm, excuse me. Promise you, I'm vaccinated. I swear to God.
Oh, you're good.
I don't know what's going on. It's like allergies or something. But
I bet.
But growing up in the country, like it was a lot of hard work, a lot of like my dad instilled in me, you know, a work ethic. Like I grew up doing labor, like I delivered beer. I don't even drink. 5 a.m. to like 8 p.m. every day. And it was just, I did that for the majority of my life. So and I've been doing that since I was like 14, hay baling and everything. So then going from farms and stuff to New York City, like New York City is already so cutthroat that people have to work really hard. So I felt like I fit in. But then moving to California, and I don't mean this in like a derogatory way, but like I ate people alive out here. Like I don't know how to say it without sounding cocky as hell, but like you just like my work ethic was worth so much out here. Like when people paid me an hourly rate, they knew that they were getting like, two workers out of it. I wasn't an engineer that was going to go up and white glove where you like walk up to a desk, mix it and walk away. I was like a laborer too. I've always been that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that work ethic really played into a lot of things. And my brother once told me, he's like, if you want something to be your job, treat it like your job. And that's exactly what I did with my music. And weirdly, in a way, he was absolutely right. So like putting in those 40-hour weeks on my music in turn got me gigs like producing, engineering. Like I now work at the Fab Factory, like Dave Pensato, the icon. Like I learned so much from his YouTube videos, and I just played my music in his studio yesterday. It's unreal, and like that all stemmed from me doing my music. And even then, like when I'm like hard up for cash, or if I'm just like looking for extra money, I edit video. So like I'll help my friends, like my friend Varo. I did like promo videos for her. I did a lyric video for my friend Lucky, the guy I mentioned earlier. So, and it all stemmed from my music. So like weirdly, it's become so ingrained in so many different facets of my life that like, it's absolutely true. Like take that work ethic and just run with it and make it your job, and it'll become your job.
Damn, that's so cool to hear that. Especially being like with us, or kind of like in a startup network, kind of doing the same sort of thing, like treating your job, just grinding. It's good to hear that you can kind of get, reward for putting the grind in,
Yeah, totally.
And so with that, because that makes sense to me. So you came out to LA. I just want to make sure I have the timeline right. So you came out to LA for a sound, like a sound job, like as far as like on tour and live events, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was basically musicals, but then I got into like corporate sound, and like just random small gigs.
Okay, and then from there, how did that transition, or was it just, I don't know if it was from directly Max Frost or other things? How did like the studio engineering aspect of your career kind of tie in for you?
So that's actually a great question, because now I get to talk about the studios.
Yeah.
I've always kind of had my own gear. I've always worked with my own stuff, and like just ignore the crappy equipment I have here, because the rest of my stuff is like all over the place. I have gear everywhere. I promise you, I don't mix on Mackies. No offense, Mackie, but but I work out of a place called MAPS, Music Arts Production Studio. It's based in Fullerton, California, which is down in Orange County. It's like 35 minutes from me. It's the most insane studio besides Fab Factory. Obviously, like Fab Factory is just like next level. Because I mean, like the stuff you listen to on the radio is produced at Fab Factory, but at MAPS, it's like this vibe of these get it done people. Like we're all musicians, we're all engineers, we're all in this together, and they really treat it that way. So I would go down there and record every once in a while, and then like one by one, I started like meeting more and more people, going to different shows. Like this guy who's saved my life in numerous occasions, and I'm not even joking. Like this dude keeps popping up in my life when I need him most. Mike Wilson, it's his studio. He like introduced me to Shape Pitaki, which is a band based out of Orange County, and the singer Shane became a very close friend, who then became a tour manager of mine on tour with Max. And it's one of those things, like you meet all these people, and weirdly all of the pieces slowly come together and then create the picture that you're in, but it's always changing. So like by just going there occasionally and like working on my music and then recording people out of there and then putting all of my work into my music, I became so much more entrenched in the studio life. And then once people saw that I was doing that, I started having more people reach out to try and like have me mix their song or help produce a song or things or feature on something, you know? So it's kind of like the more you put in, the more people will see it, and then the more people will hire you for work. But it's a tough thing because you don't see it at first, and then later you get like the results. So like
Right.
I got the Fab Factory gig. Like I went in yesterday for something. I technically got it like 2 weeks ago. So,
Wow. Okay.
but I got introduced to them by a guy that mixed one of my songs. He mixed Tension, Kai Lasker, who then works with this guy Irko, who I've been watching on YouTube for years, learning from him. And then when I went to the studio, they're working on like an Atmos room, and which is like the next level of sound quality. And then I know all about that. So then I get, you know what I'm saying? Like it's all these
Wow.
little pieces that all slowly add up, and then it just kind of morphs over time. So
Mm.
to jump directly from live engineering to studio engineering, it's tough. You have like, it's like the same language, but for different things. And it's a little more hectic in live, and it's a lot more thrown together. It's a lot more rock and roll. But then like you get in the studio and it's a lot more controlled of an environment. And there's growing pains. So you can't technically just jump right into it and do it. But you could easily get into it by just like becoming friends with the people you work with and just wanting to learn. I think most of my ability to jump from job to job and get more gigs is because I'm always like, I'll tell people straight up I don't know something and I just want to learn it. And most times people are really receptive to that, and they'll bring you in. They'll help you. As long as you ask for help, people will help you.
Wow,
So
that's so cool. I just love hearing stories like that. Like just like the different connections and the pieces, because it just kind of gives you a different kind of a cross between your work ethic and your passion mixed with like just sort of that collaborative. I feel like it's just good nature in people. You know,
mhm.
if you give it your all and give a shit, like they're gonna help you like say, hey, we can collab. Like your ideas are great with mine, and that sounds like a lot of what happened for you.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's that way for everybody. You know,
Mm.
everybody, you meet somebody new, you dig them, you work with them. And I think the excuse me, the rule of thumb, I think the rule of thumb for most of these things, especially in like a networking type thing and the gig economy, is everything worth doing is worth doing twice. So if you meet somebody and you want to work with them, try to meet them twice. And usually after that, it's kind of set in stone. You'll start to work with them more often. But if you only see them one time, especially in LA, because people are kind of flaky out here. Again, not to berate LA because this place is incredible.
Yeah.
Um, the culture is just different, but like try really hard to do stuff at least twice, because if you see them one time and you're like, oh, this is great, let's do this again, and then you don't actually follow through, you're not going to see them again.
I okay, that makes sense to me. It really does. Um, Now with all like the studio stuff, engineering in your songs, and I'm curious if this translates to your studio work. You definitely do a lot of stuff, on like was it Logic you talked about for
Yeah,
computer
yeah,
programs? Yeah. What's like your instrument background? Because I noticed a lot of guitars. Do you have like any instruments you're stronger in versus others?
yeah, I'm very much a guitar player.
Okay, I
I
thought so.
actually I went to well, okay, I can't technically say I went to this school. Long story. I got kicked out of a music school beyond my control. It's not like I did anything wrong. But it was just like a huge mistake on like the administration stuff. But I went to a very prestigious music school. Um, did some time there. I did jazz, classical. Uh, but I had a guitar teacher at HCCC, Herkimer County Community College. Shout out. Like
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with community college. It's like the best deal for your money. And I met one of the greatest guitar players I've ever seen at this place, Jason Davis. He taught me so much in like my short time at H Trip. And I still like use all of the things that he taught me daily. So almost all on guitar. And I even use that to like understand music. So sometimes like I'll play piano. Obviously synth and stuff are tied in with piano. I play bass, I play drums. I play a little bit of everything. I wouldn't say I'm on a professional level for anything other than guitar or bass, but yeah, like I mean, most instruments you're hearing on the record are me. I did have like friends come in and play. So like obviously the drums on Time Zones are ridiculous. And that's my friend
Mhm.
Nick Moran.
Oh,
Nick
cool.
Moran drums on Instagram. He is like, he's next level. He is next level drummer and musician all around. That dude is a savant with music. I had Mike Ferrucci play bass on it. Like I could do all of those parts myself, but it's just not the same as like having my friends on there. So I could play drums, nowhere near as good as Nick. So of course I put Nick on there.
Mhm.
I can play bass, but I just trust Mike Ferrucci to give me a bass line that is, again, next level. Even like some of the synth on there, I could play synth and like put stuff in there, but Alex wanted to throw a few synth lines into time zones. So I was like, yeah, dude, go for it. And he, again, it's, one of those things where, yeah. Anyway, I'm going off again.
No, because that song has so much going on with it, and I love the arrangement of it. So it made me wonder because I'm like, I feel like from doing some research, I'm like, it sounds like you're definitely guitar heavy from your
Yeah.
expertise. And I was like, man, some of these just like chords is like so good. And then it's curious to see if you're sort of like, it sounds like you obviously could be a one man band, but it's also cool to have other friends and people in networking can help you out like that too.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I'm a good guitar player, but Alex is a phenomenal guitar player. So a lot of this stuff is because I want to learn from them.
Mhm.
Like somebody as good as Alex, I would give anything to see how he thinks, like how he puts his thoughts into a cohesive thing for people to consume via guitar, you know?
Right.
And it's like it's communication. And I absolutely love that. So like whenever I have the chance to learn from somebody else or um have them work on my music, I'm going to because I want to learn. I want to That's like one of the coolest things about making music is you get to learn from so many people when you collaborate with them. Um but yeah, I grew up on guitar. I actually like technically started on bass. I really wanted to be a drummer when I was a kid, but drums are mad expensive.
Very.
um, my first guitar was actually a gift, and it was pieced together. It was like a Frankenstein. It's an old Ibanez CN100. I still use it. Her name's Rosa. My electronics plate in the back is an old Huggies thing. Because you remember
Oh,
how
wow.
Huggies came in the like little rubber boxes
Yes, yes.
cut out of there, and that's on there because of how old it is. And yeah, I mean, like, I'm mostly guitar, but I have bass. I play everything, but not professionally.
Yeah, no, I kudos to you. I'm just impressed with it. So I mean, obviously everyone has their own skills in life, but I always respect people that like an instrument I think is already enough of a skill, like one, but to be multi-versed and like have that comfort, that's just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. That's Hunter Hayes, dude. Wow. Hunter Hayes. I mean, Max too. Max Frost, unreal at everything he touches. I mean, I'll never say that to his face because he already has an ego, but like, but but Hunter Hayes, oh my God. Like I knew he does a lot of his own stuff, but like that's like dream level. I mean, guitar, bass, drums, keys, violin, cello, singing, and then all that, like we recorded it, but he mixed it and mastered it. Like
Wow.
that's what I'm looking for. Like I want to be everything. So then it's also like, a cohesive package to bring to somebody that wants to financially back me. Like you don't have to pay for studio time. You don't have to pay for a producer. You don't have to pay for an engineer. It's all part of the game,
Mm.
but it's yeah.
That's actually a great segue. And it was just happenstance because I was going to ask you that you're so involved in the music industry.
Mhm.
And I just know from my personal life, people I think just think like, oh, yeah, like this artist blew up. And it's like, I feel like they don't really have an understanding of how the mechanics of like music industry at large works.
Mhm.
What's some stuff that you feel like the public doesn't really understand about the world you're in?
If you hear of somebody that's big, add 10 years to that. They didn't show up out of nowhere. They've been there for 10 years.
Mhm.
Taylor Upsall is a great one. She's a friend of mine. She went on tour with us with Frost. Then I did a tour with her. Weirdly, it was right when COVID hit. So like me and her, because nobody knew how bad COVID was going to be. And it was like when things were starting to shut down and shows were being shut down. So like we were on our way to Chicago and we were like, oh my God, there's so many cases in Chicago. Let's not fly out of there. And we were deciding whether or not to fly out of St. Louis or to drive all the way back to LA.
Wow.
Oh man, it was insane. But she's one of those people she was already insanely talented, like incredibly talented. Melody machine. Uh, she was brought into a radio station to play one of Max's songs because she did like a really cool cover. I think it was Withdrawal. And that was like over like I think about 10 years ago or something like that. She was young. I
Mm.
don't know. I can't tell you exactly, but it's been almost 10 years that she's been doing this stuff. And that's usually how it works. But now she's got a song with Mike Shinoda. She's got a song with Black Bear. She wrote on Dua Lipa's album.
Wow.
And it all happened in the span of like a couple years, it seems like, but it's been a 10-year process. So that's another thing is like, I think longevity is what makes people successful. Like, not to quote Macklemore, but the greats weren't great because they were great. They were great because they made a lot, you know? So like, as long as you, and that's another thing too, is like looking at the industry as a musician, they don't want to just get somebody based on good music. That's only a fraction of what it is. And it sounds really impersonal, but like, let's be real. Like, if you want to survive in music, you got to have more than just good music. You have to be a good worker, because there's a lot at risk. So like, when a label signs somebody, they're handing you tons of money that like they're hoping to get back in return of investment. So yeah, it's a lot of that. Like, you have to be a hard worker. Like, I think somebody one time told me, I'm not going to say his name just in case he's not supposed to say it, but he told me that Britney Spears wasn't really all that great of a singer or a dancer. She was just that hard of a worker that she kept going. So when things got hard, she doubled down and she got better at singing. She got better at dancing. The singer of Periphery, Spencer, everybody complained about his voice. So he worked on it and worked on it and worked on it to the point where they didn't touch it with autotune at all on like the one album that came out a while back. So
Wow.
like, that's the sign of like a musician that's there to stay. What else, man? There's so much, like a lot of, I'm trying to think of other things that like but that, I mean, I could go on about that stuff forever, but that's essentially what it is. It's like, you see these musicians and you think that they just make music. I'm telling you that these people are working nonstop. Max, again, like, wouldn't say this to his face because he's just too good. He's too good at everything. And then on top of that, he's also working nonstop. Like, that's the thing, is like, he wakes up and he's in marketing. He's working on his social media. He's trying to figure out the next thing he can do video wise to keep people entertained, to keep them in on his music. He's writing, he's recording, he's working on other people's music so that he can have a little bit of an income. He's working on trying to find sync. And then on top of that, his manager's doing that too. So there's a lot that goes into this. It's not just like get up on stage and play, that's not the job anymore. Modern problems require modern solutions.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I'll ask you this, since I really love this topic. I'm a nerd for like trying to understand the music industry from the outside peons looking in. How, and mind you, I don't want no hot water or anything. I don't want to put you in a spot, but like, what do you think is like the relationship nowadays, because of the way the internet is and streaming and TikTok, between, I feel like labels and artists, there's still a relationship that exists. You can still do independent, but I feel like there's certain whether it be legacy or just even current, like streams or avenues that they have, like, distribution of, that there seems to be this relationship between like artists and labels still. What's kind of the current landscape? What are your thoughts on that? I know it's a loaded question.
I may be completely wrong. So I'm only take what I'm about to say as like my perception from where I'm sitting as an artist.
Okay.
Because I'm not big, I only have like 1,000 followers on Instagram, like whoop-de-doo, but I know artists that had like 2,500 followers on Instagram. I'm using that as like a scale.
Yeah.
That got signed. I feel like labels are looking for potential. They're looking for people that they can invest in because they're still going to make music and they're going to get like a return of investment. They're not like, at a certain level, they can be controlling. They can kind of push people to dress a certain way or do a certain thing. A lot of times that falls on the manager too, just trying to keep an image, because if that's what's working, let's stick with it so that you can keep making money. Because at the end of the day, like, if you just make music, unless you're, unless you're Bob Dylan and you live in Bob Dylan times, you can't just make music to make money. There's so much more to it now. So
Mhm.
um I unfortunately have come to the conclusion that there's a lot of influencers. Uh, Kind of like when a brand comes out of somebody with a lot of followers. It's like somebody on Instagram, let's say, has like 10,000 followers. Not that many, but it's enough that a label will come in, and I'm not going to name names, but because I know this has happened with a few people. Once they get like a certain amount of followers, a label will come in and just dump money on them and be like, make music, and they sign away the rights. So it's dope because they get to put out music, you know.
Mhm.
If they're like slightly musical, like that's kind of the dream, but also it can be kind of, shitty for people like us. But at the same time, I'm not going to judge. Get it how you live, you know.
Mhm.
Um, because Lord knows that I've gotten money doing stuff that I like. I'm not the greatest engineer, and there's so many other engineers that are so much better than me, but I still somehow get work. So I can't really say anything when it comes to musicians that aren't really musicians, that just like worked really hard on their brand, got big, and then the label saw that they were a real following, and they're like, okay, now we have a group of 10,000 people that are more likely to stream the music, so they're likely to dump some money into them and like get them studio time and get them made. um and I mean, it's sad because like I know that sounds really negative, but that's kind of what we have to do. um because people don't buy music anymore. They pirated it, and then we went to streaming, which is like probably the best answer to fighting piracy.
Mhm.
Even though I'm for, don't get me wrong, this is also not, I'm not condoning a crime, but I am for the balance of piracy and like corporate income, because it has heavily skewed towards the companies making more money than any of the musicians.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so like if an artist makes like 7% of their total income, people will look at that and scoff and be like, "Oh my god, that's terrible." But you also got to look at it from the point of view as a label. They're providing legal, they're providing marketing, they're providing um, guidance, they're providing tour support. Like they're giving money, they're getting them an agent for like a certain amount. There's so many things that go into what a label can do for an artist, and why it's a good deal. While also being kind of sketchy.
It seems like if you, from my understanding, is if you kind of have the right label that works for your
Mhm.
music branding, then it could be a great relationship, right? If it's something that
Yeah.
isn't a great fit, then you're right. It turns into like kind of siphoning money like crazy for not a great return on investment. Just like anything else, I think, like if
Yeah.
it's a stocks or a business, I think that's like musicians are like a business. And so
Yeah.
finding the right partners, that's a good way to look at it. I think like you're right. I think before people are like, oh, you have to go to a label to get anywhere. Nowadays,
Mhm.
you can do it indie. You can do it, like on a smaller label, but then you can go to like a Capital or Atlantic or like big VC, like a venture capital firm, and
Mhm.
that's kind of a good way to give that perspective. I think as you're diving
Yeah.
into it.
It's almost like labels are becoming more of a multimedia thing.
Mm-hmm.
They are still there for the music, and the whole purpose of it is music, but it's becoming a multimedia service company. So, helping you create the video, helping you get the right image, helping you get followers, helping you do the right thing, because they make a percentage off of everything that you do. So like you're absolutely right. There as negative as that seems, there are a lot of artists that find the perfect fit. And then there's a lot of artists that like, kind of do their own thing and then they get big. Big Crit, one of my favorite rappers of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I love Southern hip hop. I think it's like the holy grail of hip hop. And
Mm-hmm.
Big Crit became who he was over the course of being on Def Jam, and they didn't really service him. They didn't really like, they didn't do him a service. They didn't help him. They gave him all the stuff to get to where he was, but he just wasn't growing. Goes independent, blows up. Like I remember when I was following him, he had like 5,000 followers, and now he's at like 500,000.
Wow.
And it happened very quickly after he went independent. So it is possible to do it with or without. Um, but he I mean, just in general, like there's definitely labels out there that want to help you. These people aren't out to get you. They're out to make money. And if you go in with the idea that they're there for just your music and just your talent, that's where you'll get hurt. You know, you have to look at yourself as a business. Otherwise, when you get into the music business, they're going to treat you like the commodity you think that you are, you know?
That's a
I hope
great
that
way to
makes
put
sense.
it.
Yeah.
All right, the one question I have off kilter, but it's a little tinfoil hat, but I feel like it'd be a fun question to ask you. Not in the naming names part, but the term I've heard it, I've gone down a rabbit hole of industry plants in music.
Mhm.
Do you feel like that's an actual thing that does happen at times as far as, and I'll let the fans know, industry plant, what it is essentially is artists that almost has no virtual background. And then they almost kind of pump up inorganic, but it feels organic following. And then they kind of come out of nowhere and like, wow, who is this artist? And it wasn't like they kind of did, like you said, the grassroots thing, like doing like college shows and blowing up. What are your feelings on that and anything you've ever seen in that realm?
Let's just say this. Country music is the most lucrative type of music. Just the demographic buys it still. Weekend warriors, they go out to shows, they want to have a good time. So there's a lot of money spent on alcohol and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I can say is that there's a very specific country group that has the name of an area of the United States, but they're from Ohio. And their name has nothing to do with Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So like I can't confirm it with proof. But sometimes I understand that, because weirdly there's people, and this might be an explanation for the conspiracy, but like I think it was Katy Perry had a deal with a label and they just weren't doing anything for her, but she was like a great singer, she was a great talent, she was writing and stuff like that, but she just wasn't getting put on the pedestal like she is now. She leaves that deal, goes with another company, and all of a sudden, boom, she's a huge success. So it may seem like she's not, like she's coming out of nowhere, but in fact, she did come from someplace.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, because there's a few artists that, like, in my brain kind of feel that way. And I think a lot of times it's mostly, again, this is, I have no way to prove it, but I feel like it's like the younger artists that, already have a following count on like Instagram or TikTok or something like that. Then this label will come in and be like, here's a whole bunch of money to make music. And then they push them as an artist, because again, it's multimedia. So if they make them a musician rather than an influencer, then they seem like they add something. So they're a little bit more consumable. And that's where I said I'm not going to name names. Like, there was a very specific person that I know of that like got a huge following from going to the protests and stuff. And like, I loved what he did. Like, he was a really like funny and light personality in a very, very tense time, because I'm not going to get into the politics of stuff, but like,
no, that's fair.
he was a great voice where people needed it. He kind of like made people agree with each other. Like, yeah, police, you have no idea what they're walking in on. Like, if you were in that position, you would be scared shitless too. And then the same deal of like, the whole racist side of things are like, there's proof, like, how can you ignore that? But he made it so that people were kind of cool on either side, and that got him like a huge following count, huge. And then a few months later, he like starts coming out with music, and he was never really musical. And he had like a deal with a label and stuff. And that's like the most tinfoil hat I can get. Because like, I can see why they do it. It all makes sense up here, why they do it, why they would, get an influencer and turn them into a musician. But I think the most conspiracy theory side of things that I can do is like, they'll take somebody and make them something they're not, like make them get tattoos, make them wear certain clothes, look a certain way, because that's what a stylist does. Actually, the guy who did all my tattoos, there's a guy from Syracuse who is like a huge rapper, who like was a joke, and he says he's from Houston, but he's actually from like Syracuse. the guy who did my tattoos. Oh no. Oh dear, I hit it. The guy who did my tattoos had to do a full like chest piece for him in a matter of like a couple of days. Like it's normally something that takes like a long time, but he did like 2 12-hour sessions to do his entire front side, and it was because the label really wanted him to have that look.
Wow.
But it worked. It totally worked because that dude is like worth millions of dollars now, even off of like joke music. So yeah, that's a thing. I'll say that.
It's so fast. Yeah, it is. Like I said, I know putting anyone on a growing spot, but I just have a feeling. I'm like, I have a feeling that it's an interesting enough topic that there has to be aspects that exist. If that makes sense.
It's not out of the realm of reality.
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it this way, dude. If Walmart or any of these companies can like tell what color yolk in an egg sells best and then manipulate the chickens to poop out that color yolk so that they make more money selling eggs in different regions of the United States. If they can do that, imagine what a multi-million-dollar, like billion-dollar industry can do with music.
Easily. Yeah, completely. So let's mix it up because I'm going to talk more about maybe like where you think music will go. But I wanted to tackle one thing that's really big in your life is live shows. I mean, sound engineer, but also performances in your own band, even solo possibly. What are kind of like, I know this is gonna be a big question, but what's like memorable experiences you have? Anything that sticks to like your mind? Any sort of like, what's like rules of the road? I guess that makes sense.
Rules of the road. One of the main things that like I try to, because a lot of people will come to me and like ask to try and get into the industry as like an engineer or something like that, or like just be a stagehand because they want to be around music, and it's totally understandable. Artists are not there to be a celebrity; they're there to work. That's their job.
Right.
So like when I go in, like, don't get me wrong, it's wild to like hang out with Rob Thomas and think like, you know, Matchbox 20, Smooth, like all it's so crazy to look back on it. But when you're there, you can't treat somebody like that. And it's so wrong to try and pitch yourself to somebody like that, you know. It's just like this unwritten rule that like everybody kind of knows. And that was like one of the questions that I got asked when I was interviewing for Fab Factory was you know, like what type of rule is unsaid when it comes to dealing with like, you know, top tier talent, you know, the AAA acts. And it's just like, you know, don't be like, hey, check out my music, man, I think it's sick. Like, it doesn't work that way, you know. As for like touring and stuff, very specific. But like if you're on a bus, sleep with your feet towards the front. That's like, don't poop on the bus. That's another one too. Man, I'm trying, I don't know.
Quick interjection, but Toronto said the same thing about the bus, the sleeping on the tour bus.
Yeah.
Said the same thing.
So, yeah, you gotta sleep with your feet towards the front, because in case they slam on the brakes or you get in an accident, your head isn't just crushed. And like obviously no pooping on the bus, because that's like a huge fine. You have to pay like a ton of money to empty the tank. And you know, the smell. There's also like somehow, for some reason, like the back room, unless it's like the main bus, the back room always turns into like a shoe room. I don't know, like everybody takes their shoes off in the back, so then all the stank stays back there, you know.
Interesting. Okay.
That's a thing that happens.
Wow.
I bet you this is what you were thinking about when you asked this question.
Yeah, this is a deep dive. I love it.
Trying to think. There's like weird tiers to like audio, lighting. There's like these weird promotion, like these levels. So like I think A3 isn't really a term that's used, but like an audio utility or like an audio tech. So like there's stagehand, the person at the bottom, they like have a C wrench and are ready to help pick shit up.
Like roadie.
Yeah, like a roadie.
Okay.
And then like you go up to like audio tech or like lighting tech. So you have a little bit of more specificity in what you do. And then like A2, you're mixing monitors, or you're like an audio tech on the stage helping put things up. And then like A1 is the person at the front of house. He's like the guy mixing the show. And he's typically the guy that makes all the major decisions when it comes to audio. And there's like audio designer. I've done that a few times, where like you design the show and how it's built. Um, it's crazy because all those little levels and tiers also play into music. So like you can be like the hired gun, you know, you're like the specificity. So you would be like, instead of being a stagehand, you're like you could be a hired gun, like a guitarist, you could be the drummer or something. Um, and you're kind of like the music tech, I would say, you know. And again, this is all my perspective. I might be wrong on this, but
Right.
then above that is like the actual band members, the people who write the music, and that's like, you know, A1 or whatever. And then there's like the artist, the person who does all the like everything. That's like, you know, A1 or a designer or whatever. And then like music, the music director is kind of like what Alex does a lot for Spacebar Society. They go in with an artist for the rehearsals, and they have their whole session brought up on like Logic or Ableton. It's typically Ableton because it's much easier to use in a live setting.
Mhm.
And they craft the show so that it's more cohesive, it's more consumable. And then usually the MD will like play in the show with them. So like that's one of those things that I didn't know about going in. I always thought like the artist did everything. They don't. Max did because he's capable, and like technically I'm my own MD. So like when I build my show, I'm sitting upstairs playing the song like 1,000 times, and then like, oh, maybe if I did this, it'll be better. Or like, okay, Nick, play that fill like this, you know what I mean? Because then it'll add to like the build here in this section. Um, so that's an interesting job that like I didn't know existed on the outside. And they usually will be like the person to go to on tour. Like if something happens with the stems, they'll have a copy or like a backup. Um, Tons of things like that. These are like those little details that are kind of boring, but also really interesting. So,
Oh, it is. I think this fascinating. So
yeah, there's but it's funny because like in the world that I'm in, telling you this is kind of like basic. You know what I mean? Like everybody in the industry knows what an MD is, knows what an A1 is, and stuff like that. So like for somebody who's not on the inside, who like just goes to shows casually, and um they're not like constantly looking up like, oh, who's the songwriter on that, or oh, who produced that, or who engineered that. um there's so much, like, I mean, even making a song, like I wrote a song, like for, let's use Tension. um I wrote Tension, brought it to Frost, he co-produced it. So like he produced some stuff, I produced some stuff, then we took it to a vocal engineer, Alex added a few things into it, so he was technically a co-producer. um he did so much on my voice to make it sound so beautiful. And then uh from there it went to Frost again, who did like the final touches on production. I added a few tiny little things, changed a few things. Like originally I sang in a higher register for the first verse. I decided to make it lower so that when the chorus comes in, it hits a little bit harder, you know. And then uh after that it goes to an engineer, like a mixing engineer. So the mixing engineer doesn't record it, he just mixes it, because that is like a bigger job. So like the more intricate this music gets, the more people get involved with it because of how specific it is. So I sent it to Kieran Kai, and he mixed it. And then typically would go to a mastering engineer, but he mastered it for me. Um, and then we would send it to a distributor, or like in another case the label would take it and then just distribute it. But yeah, and then like there's so many other things that go into that, where you have to like master to a certain level, because Spotify, um app like the Apple Music, Deezer, all these other streaming platforms have different levels that they will put out, and they'll actually
wow.
squash the sound to make it, it'll sound worse if it's too loud, or it'll sound way too loud if it's too quiet.
Hmm.
There's so many little things like that, and every single person is so good at their job that that's like their only job. So like Kai is a mix engineer, that's his job because he's that good, you know.
Mhm.
I'm not at that level, so I'm a songwriter, producer, engineer, live engineer, all these other things, because I'm good. Like people will hire me, but I'm not Kai Lasker good, I'm not, you know, Dave Pensato good. Soon I'll be there, but that's the thing, you know.
I love that. That's the mentality. You will get there.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of this is faith, dude. A lot of this is just like, I know so many incredible musicians that were just failures to launch because they didn't believe in themselves. And it's like, ever since I was a kid, like even when I was young, I was obsessed with music. Like I needed it. So like I know that my life is going to be in music, and it's going to take a huge change for me to get out of it. Because like 100% of my income is music and engineering, 100%. So like for me to do anything else it's going to take a lot for me to quit. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that there is money in it. I remember buying my car when I bought years ago when I was still living in Herkimer. It was like it was after college. I was in a rough spot. I was working labor jobs. I got a job as like a stagehand and like an audio engineer. And I bought a new car, and I drove back, and like my dad was like, all right, shit. He's right. There's money in music. But no, there's money out there.
That's so cool. It's funny because I've always, like, my brother's been into it since like middle school for him, and now he's like just graduated college. And my parents have always, I think, were hesitant, like, oh, like unless you're like Ed Sheeran, you're not doing anything. You know, that was like the extremes. And I'm like, Mom, no, there's like so many avenues. You don't understand. So I always kept pushing them, like, hey, you know, shoot for the stars, you get the moon. You never know. So I totally get what you're saying. It's funny when you said the car story with your dad. So
yeah, it's like that, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still tough. Like I know a lot of people who have like their parents will help them. They already had like a good amount of money and they got into music because that's what they want to do. There's very few people who can like survive and like work and survive only off of the music. And I'm lucky enough to say I'm one of them. Because I didn't have like a safety net or anything like that. But it's you know, nothing to judge people on because their love for music and their passion and their hard work is still there. But it is out there. It is possible. And if that's anything, like, I'm not thinking that I'm like this huge artist or anything like that. But if I ever do blow up, or if I do become like a big name in the industry, like it's already a huge deal for me to be at Fab Factory. But like if I ever become something, I just want that to be what people take away from me, is that, like, you know, even if you're some kid, this is a specific person I'm thinking of too, even if you're some kid that has only like dreamed of just being a stagehand because it's as close as you think you'll ever get to music, it's possible, dude. Like, keep doing it, keep asking, keep pushing, and you can get out there. It's tough. It seems nearly impossible, and the deck is stacked against you, but it is a possibility, and you can and will do it if you wanted to.
I love it. That's so cool. So with live, and then we'll kind of tie into your stuff. I don't want to hold you up too much, but with live, is there any memorable stuff while you were on tour that happened? Like there was a certain show that just was like over the top, or like something. I'm sure you have a Rolodex of stuff.
Yeah. Well, first of all, heads up, my camera looks like it's dying. Because it's old shit. But if it does die, I'm sure it'll switch over to my computer and we should be good. But if that happens, I'll just like skate back a few sentences and go back to where we were and start over there.
Yeah, I can clean it up in post. So
yeah. So, well, how dirty can I get?
From our end, knock yourself out. I mean, we've literally had like OnlyFans people on other shows and stuff. So our end is good. It's just more your professional end for you.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Well, I'm not going to say who. We're sponsored by a computer company who are trying to compete with Apple. We typically used Apple for everything, right? So we transferred the file and the show to the new computer. And when we got it set up, we tested it. It seemed fine. We go to the sound check, we go to the show, and we do everything. It seems normal. And I was mixing for front of house. I was mixing his ears, and I was also mixing for a live stream. Now the thing is at the end of the sound check, somebody came over the monitors and they're like, "Hey, I'm getting like a weird buzz in the acoustic line. Can somebody check that out?" And I, like, as like the engineer, I was kind of like, "What the fuck was that?" So I go and I find out that they had another guy trying to mix the live stream. And I'm like, "No, that's my job. I already have a mix set, so don't touch it." Like I was way nicer than that. Don't get me wrong. I was way nicer than that. I'm like, oh guys, you know, but I'm just for sake of the story, I'm keeping it short and kind of pissed off. But so like we talk with him. I go over to his desk to like the console to see how he had it, and he didn't have the right file up. So that made me a little nervous. I was like, okay, so your acoustic line is actually the overhead, and the buzz that you're getting is just wind. Like we don't use this channel, dude. Like that's, you already messed it up. So like, let me do the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
The people at the company were like, no, we gotta do it. We really want him to do it. I'm like, all right, well, like, just make sure my name isn't in the live stream if he messes up. Like, if he fucks us up, it's not on me.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, all right, yeah, sure, whatever. So we get a nice little sound check going for him. He seems good. Now, a lot of times with artists, they'll have a click in their ear. So like through the show, they'll be like the entire time so that they can stay on beat. And that typically is like a channel on the console, but we only send it to their ears, not through the thing, because we don't want people to hear it. With the clicks in his ear, we also put notes in so that he could, remember his show. So like at some points he'll be at the mic in the center, some points he'll be at the mic at the side. And at this section of the song, it'll be like, because we're kind of smart asses, be like, hey, don't forget to move the mic from the stand, you fucking douche, or something like that in the notes. So like, he hears it in his ear. It's just like so he doesn't forget to move the mic from the stand. So that's information for later, because we do the show, things seem like they're going okay. After, in like the second song, there starts to be a stutter. So like if the song is going like boo da, boo da, boo da, that, like there's a stutter.
Mm-hmm.
We realized this because the computer couldn't handle it. So the computer that our sponsor gave us couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
So he starts yelling to a photographer who's a friend of his. He's like, because I can't leave the front of house. I can't run out from behind the desk. He yells down. He's like, go get, in between like the song, so he's not yelling in the silence, my computer from backstage and bring it up, and he's like, what? So he yells again. He's like, get my fucking MacBook. And right when the song skips, it's like, boo, boo, MacBook. Oh, like you hear it clear as day. So of course our sponsor was pissed. But we finished the show. Show works great on the Apple. We thought that was it. We thought we were good, So we go about our business. We fly back home. About a week later, I get a frantic phone call from the artist, and he's like, did you know about this? And I'm like, what? He sends me a video. The live stream, the guy had left the click track and the notes like cranked up. So like when people were watching at home, like hundreds of people for an hour and a half set, they heard the click the entire fucking time and the notes. So like randomly throughout the show, you'd hear like, quit laughing, you're not supposed to laugh in this part, you fucking moron, stuff like that, the entire fucking show.
Oh my god.
But we found out like a week later, and so they took down the stream. We got into like a huge pissing match with them, and it was like hilarious, but we had to be professional. We were like, why did you let this slide? How did you not notice?
Mm-hmm.
So that was like one professional flub that like wasn't my fault, but I still kind of take it as my own because I didn't get to mix this thing.
Wow.
So there's that. Let's just say there was one time on tour where we went to a club. It was after a show. We went to a club and we were like, this sucks. We don't want to be around like, lasers and fog machines and raves. So we're like, let's just go to like a small bar where we can get like some food or something. So again, I'm not going to say what artist I was with, but one of the people that was with us, he was like super good at his job. He was a short little guy. He kind of looked like Odd Job. So we called him Odd Job.
Okay.
And miserable little fuck. We found a bar online called The Odd Job, which I'm pretty sure is closed down, so I'm safe to say it. So like, oh, we gotta go check it out.
Yeah.
We go and we check it out. We get to the door, and the guy at the door is like, you here for the private party? And I'm just like, yeah. So he's like, all right, go ahead. He checks our IDs. We go in, and there's a lady that's already like sloshed. She's polluted out of her fucking mind. she's checking names, and I'm literally looking at the thing with our tour manager, who's also looking at the names and feeding them to the whole group. So all of us are getting in using other people's names. So she's like, "Oh yeah, come on in, Bill," and like just crossing off the list. We get in and we're like looking around, and we're like, man, this is just kind of like a shitty Halloween party, like a shitty corporate Halloween party.
Yeah.
And because people are in like these costumes, and it's San Fran, right? So
Okay.
like we see people like making out in the corner. I'm like, oh, San Fran, they're just like free love or whatever. And then like the DJ is like doing the thing. There's some stuff in front of her, and I realize what that stuff is. I feel like it's a little too much to say what they were, but let's just say they were toys.
Okay.
And then I realized that there was like a group of 3 people like kissing, and I was like, oh my God. And I figured it out. I turned to the tour manager. I'm like, dude, we're at a swingers club. So like, and then the artist turns to me and he has like this Cavassier of like this very fine like scotch. And he's like, well, boys, today we have to take a gander for the good of humanity. We need to see these things. And I was like, no, my God, no, I don't want to see this. We're like walking up the stairs to like the actual party, and there's signs about consent, and like they're all like, it was like called the Mile High Club, and there was like all these like flight attendant things. And then like we're walking up and this guy compliments my outfit. And just so you know, like I just got done with a show, so like I'm disgusting. I'm so gross. And like but like the guy's like, oh, I really like your outfit. So I turned to the Odd Job and the short little dude. I'm like, you're my boyfriend tonight. I am not doing this. So like if anybody asks, you're my boyfriend tonight. And I was like, my girlfriend, who is like fantastic, Kayla, I love you so much. She was like totally cool about it, because it's like we had to see it. We had to go look. We had to check it out. Yeah. And
you're that deep in, you have to.
We had to. We can't. How do you not? You know, you're already there, right? So like anyway, we get upstairs. We get this like speech about how consent works, and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not gonna touch anybody, sure. So like they let us in. We walk to the back wall, and there's like this like blanket up almost, and we get to that wall, and there's like music. There's a ball pit. Go figure. And we were like, oh, this is kind of just chill. Like people are just hanging out drinking or whatever. We did. So there wasn't really that much going on. Like, oh, all right, well, whatever. Maybe let's check the rooftop, see what that is. And it just seemed like a really chill party. People were super nice, super open. They obviously knew we were not meant to be there. And they were like totally cool with it. They're like, oh, hey, yeah, this is what we do. And honestly, weirdly, in a way, I learned a lot from it, because like we come from a very conservative place, like where I grew up. So like, you know, multiple partners is like, no, that like people will abhor that. They'll hate that.
Yeah.
So like these people were super nice, and they're like, no, it's just what we do. It's like we like it. Like, don't you have things that you like that you think are kind of like most people would think are weird? And I'm like, yeah, kind of, I guess. Like, I guess so. So then all of a sudden I had like a really big respect for these people, because they go out and they do it. But we saw a few things. Like I guess we saw what we came for, and like we were ready to go. Cause like we were all standing by the edge, and like just like people were drinking, we were hanging out, and one guy yells out from over by these tents, and he's like, dude, they're fucking. So of course, like we all like go over and look. We're like, look at it. You're like children.
Yeah.
And then like we're trying to get out, so we go downstairs, and we forgot like the direction, and we get back to that wall, and like the tour, I almost said his name. Oof. But the tour manager opens it up, and he's like, dude, look. So we like look in, and there's like a whole room of people just going at it. And we were like, Jesus, like
holy fuck.
The smell, dude. That's the most the smell. I was like, all right, smell. I'm officially done. And then like we like turned to leave, and the tour manager, he's the only one that was single. He's like, well, I'm staying. And he just kind of like grabbed his 2 drinks and like danced into the crowd and disappeared. It was like something out of a movie, you know? So we go back to the hotel. It's like 3 a.m. and we sleep for like 2 hours. We had to be up at like 5:30, and because we were dropping the artist off while we were going to drive the rest of the way. And he was going to go to the airport for some radio shit. And we walked down into the lobby, And in comes our tour manager. And I shit you not, he was holding a rubber chicken and he had a captain's hat. And the guy at the counter was like, Captain Goodwin? Like, what the fuck? And that's basically how the story ended. But
that's absolutely wild.
That was after like the most insane. It was the most insane start to a tour ever, because we were driving north from LA and the van we were in went into limp home mode. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's a thing where like the van, it just would only do like 25, and we're on the 5 heading north through LA. Like, that's not safe. We're doing 25 miles an hour where everybody's doing 80. So we like get to a Mercedes dealership in Santa Clarita, and they take a look at it, and it's because the person who serviced it like messed something up. Like, he didn't close, like it was just spraying oil everywhere. It was a disaster.
Oh my
God.
God.
We're like gonna be late for our show in Santa Cruz. So we like pull over, we get it done. It's like 4 p.m. by the time we leave. So we get to Santa Cruz about like 8, and the show starts at 8. So we like hold the door, we load in. It was the first time we actually set up the show, because there's lights, everything. Load in like 15 minutes, which is normally like an hour. We just like, boom, got it done, you know? Show goes on. We finish the show. Next morning, we wake up and we're driving over a mountain, and like there's this mountain pass. And as soon as you come up over the crest of it, there's a pileup. And like, I remember the tour manager, he was on the phone. He's like, hey, let me call you back. Just as cool as a cucumber. Slams on the brakes, and we somehow, even with a trailer, like skirt through all these cars that are completely just demolished without hitting anything. There's about 10 cars in that pileup. And we get down past it and we see smoke. So we pull over, and we were there for a good 45 minutes because it was the brakes. The brakes locked up, so they needed some time to cool down.
Okay, yeah.
So we pull over. We're there for 45 minutes. 2 cars drove by, and it was like a main highway. Wow. So like the pileup was horrible, and we happened to miss it by like inches. So we get to the show in San Fran. We had a ridiculous couple of days. Then we end up at a fucking swingers party. Yeah.
That's something, yeah, you tell the grandkids, you know?
Oh yeah, I can't wait to tell my grandkids when they're 21.
Yeah, wait till like they like understand conceptualness of that. So yeah. Last live question, then we'll kind of go into like the other stuff is where like the top, is there like any cities that you think of that you were like, these were just great towns to perform at?
Oh wow. I mean, with the pop punk stuff, Rochester's always a great time in New York. I think the best show I ever played personally was my hometown, because like there was something about that. Like we like the room was only supposed to have like a couple hundred people, and we had far more than that. And then like we sold out the bar, which was huge.
Wow.
And we made a lot of money for like a local club. And that was in Herkimer. And that was so cool, because like we got to say like, you know, we're Atticus Finch and we're from Herkimer, New York. And that felt so fucking good. But that's like, you know, that's the dream. But New York is always a good time, obviously, because it's just rowdy. New Yorkers know what's up. Savannah, Georgia is my favorite. Savannah, Georgia is beautiful. It makes me proud to be American when I'm there because of the history. It's sketchy because it's like got so much history, and there's like, it's like the city built on her dead, they say. Mm-hmm. It's like something in the air down there is so much fun. So in Mobile, Alabama too. You wouldn't think it. Great city, great music. There's a rapper out of there I really like that I met 2 times. I don't even think he'll remember me, but Mr. 88, I think his name was. He was the shit. He really good Southern rapper.
Wow.
But Savannah, Georgia, the music scene is great. There's a lot going on in Old Town. It's beautiful. Same with Mobile. Mobile is kind of like a mini New Orleans. And it's like, it's nice because it's like centralized.
Streaming Cassettes, Wingman of the Year. We have Jordy now from camera number 2.
That's right. Camera 1, camera 2. So yeah, Mobile, Savannah, Austin is always the shit. But that's kind of like, you know, everybody kind of knows that. Don't mind my in-ears. I have my in-ears running.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah, no. Yeah, I feel like even somebody who's ever, like, I've never been to Austin, but you know.
Yeah, you just kind of know.
Yeah.
But those are the sleepers. Like I didn't expect those to be so fucking dope. man, I'm trying to think of some other ones because like obviously Portland, Seattle. I mean, every city that you go to is awesome, but like there's some that are just like no, and I don't want to say because there's one in the Midwest where like they were just like, oh yeah, this place got shot up like 3 days ago, and there are like bullet holes in the wall on stage and shit, and we were like, all right, maybe this is not going to be good, and like nobody showed up for the show because it's like, who would.
Right.
But yeah, it's I think weirdly Savannah, Georgia is one of my favorite places on the planet.
Good to know. Sydney,
Australia.
No shit, a little global action, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, any place in Australia is great. They just like, it's not that they love music more, but it just seems like they're a little bit more into going to shows, like no matter what size they are. Because I was with Bastille when we were in Australia.
Wow, holy shit.
I did Germany too, but Germany was different. Hamburg. I don't know too much about live music there because I didn't see much, but the Reaper Bond, we did a show in like a basement, and like even if nobody knew who the artist was, there's already people there because it's the Reaper Bond. It's already like kind of a party town. People are already at the bars, so like that was a lot of fun. And it's like you show up at a party, do a set, and then leave, and the party keeps going. So like that's dope. Hamburg is the shit. Yeah, that for real. It's like the party is going on with or without you. So like even if you just completely fail, at least you know that like the party ain't that, like you didn't ruin it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But overall, it's hard to fuck up there because it's just the feel of being there. You just know you're like in this fucking pirate city. It's like if Hamburg were a person, it would be a fucking punk in a jean jacket smoking a cigarette, catcalling Americans. So Hamburg is the shit.
Wow, that's crazy. I've heard cool things about Germany and like made the overall picture, but I never knew that about Hamburg's how you technically say it, right? Correctly?
I think so. Hamburg. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, Hamburg's that just screams like, oh, I want a Hamburg. That's
America. Yeah.
That's amazing, dude. That's wild. So, and it's funny, Savannah, my wife's actually going down for a friend from the Northeast, but they wanted to do like a destination wedding in Savannah. So that's like in 3 weeks. So yeah.
That's funny because I just spoke with my girlfriend about it, and we both decided, we're like, yo, if we ever get married, we're getting married in Savannah. This place is beautiful.
No shit. Okay.
It's amazing, dude.
I'm gonna have to tell her that. So yeah, okay. So let's tie this in with the live to overall. So obviously COVID-19, right? And that definitely put a huge change on things, especially in music, entertainment. Two things. One, how have you managed during COVID for yourself with overall? And then do you kind of see what the path forward is going to be for getting back out to what you're doing and loving?
I think in this industry, I've seen a lot of people go into different stuff. Like I know a couple of my friends that were like in unions and stuff. They started delivering for Amazon and shit. Which is like, you got to do what you got to do. And that's what I praise that more than anything. Cause I just kind of like, I'm trying to wait it out, but I feel like a lot of people got out of it and got out of music or because like they can't sustain. I saved up a ton of money, and because of touring and everything like that, I had a nice little nest egg, which is now gone. But I used that to sustain. And then the tiny little bit of unemployment that I got, I had to live off of that because like, otherwise I wouldn't be able to survive. And like, obviously by the grace of like my girlfriend got like a really good job doing like video stuff. So she's an actress, she's a dancer. She went on tour within this moment. She was a dancer for them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty wild. Shout out to those guys, especially Chris and his shitty Destiny. I would still recommend Destiny, but he probably doesn't even remember me, but yeah. And Travis too. He's also from upstate New York. Go figure. We really bonded over that. And Maria's from Sequoia. No, not Sequoia. She's from outside of Albany. She's also
Scotia.
No, not Scotia. Damn, what's the name? Not Troy.
Saratoga,
I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah. She would come down and she would do like shows and shit. I remember like I never said it to her when I saw her, but like I was like, yeah, you opened for my band back in the day. Like, but now of course like they're traveling the fucking world.
Right. No
I was like,
shit.
damn, I know her from somewhere. And then I realized, like, holy shit, she was that girl with an acoustic that one time. It was like Rensselaer or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
but like it's such a small world.
It
But
is.
but yeah, so like she helped a lot, like not only just like she would cover me at times when I really needed it. And I always made it back. Like I always made money off of producing and stuff like that. So like I made most of my money probably off of engineering. So like I mixed a couple bands, made a bunch of money off of that. Then I started doing video too, so I made money doing that. It's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul, but I
Right.
made it through, and now that it's starting to look up, I'm getting more and more gigs, more and more offers to work gigs. I'm still like, I already got this job at Fab Factory as an assistant. So I'll be doing a lot more there, and that will slowly, hopefully I'll move up as I get better and learn from them. So it's, I see it as like kind of a game of surviving. Like in this industry, as long as you're available, they'll call you. You know what I mean? So a lot of these people became not available, like moved back home or left the industry completely. So
Mm.
um, I think I'm lucky in the sense that like I had this money that allowed me to stick around and keep myself available.
A little process of elimination, sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. So like they're not going to call the person who has to fly out. So
That makes sense. I feel like, yeah, that makes absolute sense to me. If you're readily available
mhm,
and you're in one of these hubs, like
yeah.
obviously you could do a lot of things online, but I feel like, especially in the creative process, like being available in person is a huge asset versus like this,
100%. Yeah, I'm also waiting on the Belasco. Like I was head audio at Belasco like right before COVID hit, and I was going to train up to hopefully help with production management. So like when the artists come in, I'm the guy that facilitates everything and all that. But like that's, again, it's like the waiting game. You know what I mean? Like soon that'll open up. Like right now, outdoor shows are happening, so there's
Mhm.
that. Um, but of course, like they're only going to ask the people who are actually available. So that's where it comes in.
Right. And with that, where do you see like kind of the trend of like music between a health perspective, but obviously the biggest thing that I think came out of COVID was the rise of TikTok, and obviously
Mhm,
streaming's been around, but just these like kind of quick, like instantaneous, you can make mini viral moments.
mhm.
And actually, I feel like I've seen Max Frost on there in different videos and stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, he's gotten a lot of following on there because of his like the Killers cover Justin Bieber Peaches and shit like that.
Right. Yes, that's what I thought. I literally was. It's so funny. I saw him like maybe 6 weeks ago on my FYP, and I was like, "Oh, this is really
Mhm.
cool." And then when I saw it was in your bio on Instagram, like, oh, okay, this connection makes sense. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he's already up in it. Yeah, where do you see things going? I guess in that picture.
Um, well, streaming shows
Mhm.
they're going to be around for a little bit, but I think that they're probably going to collapse and we're going to go back to live, because once we're allowed to have a show, it's going to be fucking crazy. Like it's going to be nonstop. I already signed a contract for a tour, and that's going to be in September, COVID permitting.
Mhm.
But like it's going to come back. It's going to be harder than ever for like the first couple of years, uh, and then it'll go back kind of normal, I think. Shows online will still happen, but probably nothing like they used to, like they were.
Right.
TikTok was already on its rise, but because of COVID, it spiked even higher because everybody was home.
Exactly.
Um, I think uh I think weirdly that's where I think the bubble is going to come from. So like I said before, I don't know if I mentioned it in the actual recording, but I mentioned before that I think that there's like a like bubble or like an economy bubble when it comes to like how this stuff works. Excuse me. So like people are inflating so many things, so it's kind of hard to guess where these things are going, right? So the big thing at first was getting a lot of followers on Instagram, but you can buy those. You can buy a bunch of fake followers. So like they want to see interaction. So like they combated that with like how you interact with your fan base. And then that changed because then people were faking that because they want to make it seem like that so they can get like in quicker and easier. Then they changed it to how long people, like impressions, how long people are looking at your stuff, how many people are saving your things. So like that's the key. Make people save your post, and that'll boost you a little bit in the algorithm.
Mhm.
So same thing with streaming. People were doing that with Spotify. The thing was to get more streams, because then labels would be like, oh, wow, look at the streams I got. You can buy those. There's companies that have hundreds of computers hooked up listening to random shit just so you can get a couple thousand streams. So that doesn't mean anything anymore. Then you go to like they were like, okay, we need to pay attention to the percentage of return. How many people return after listening to other things? Because then it shows that it's more human. People started finding ways to fake that. So it's like artists don't actually want to do the work. And like many other industries too, people don't want to do the work. But then it makes it easier for you to see who's real, because then they have different things. They're doing different things. You can tell who's actually in it and who's doing it for real. You know what I'm saying? And then that becomes more sustainable. So like people on TikTok who like post a video of them jamming out to their song in their car is getting some play, but give it time and like people are going to be like, they're already faking it. Like they're sitting with their guitar in the middle of a field, not plugged in anywhere, just miming what is recorded and like being like, yo, I recorded this today, check it out. It's like, yeah, all that shit is fake. Anytime you see somebody on TikTok singing their song or whatever, 9 times out of 10, this shit's fake. And we're starting to catch on. Same thing with advertising. Advertising is like, it used to be you'd have to see an ad 7 times over the course of like an hour for it to actually sit in your brain. Now it's like fucking 20 times or something like that. So that's why you have those 5-second ads on YouTube, because it's how you can consume it quick enough. And I think the same thing is happening with music and impressions and how people consume it. So now I think the thing that's going to pop the bubble is real, is people being real. I get the most play on my stuff when I'm being honest, when I'm being relatable, not when I'm like, hey, check out my song, or like, oh, I made this, look at this. It's like, I wrote this song because like tension. The whole point of the song was like, you have sexual tension with a girl, you want to hook up with her, and then you hook up with her, and then you have that tension afterward. What do we do now? And I hated that. I don't agree with that lifestyle. I think that it's really toxic. So I wrote a song about it. Like she said she's in love. I said, wait until the chorus. What are we going to do about this tension? So like explaining that on TikTok, I got so many more views of like people trying to understand than I did people just like, oh, this shit's sick, or like, oh, that's really flashy and like catches your eye. I did a lot of promo stuff, and looking at the metrics of it, it doesn't matter. People just want what's real. And that's coming. And weirdly, we've already seen it happen in the music industry. More and more artists that are doing it because they love it are coming out. Like I always think of Royal and the Serpent. Like, yeah, their social media game is pretty crazy. Like they have a manager who's like really good at that shit. But like on top of that, she's also extremely honest. She is herself at all fucking times. And that's why people love her. That's why people feel identity with her, because they're not identifying with a fucking picture. They're identifying with a person,
Wow. Yeah, that makes absolute total sense.
So that's what I think is happening. There's like a like bubble. There's like a social media bubble that's going to pop when people are more real.
Mm-hmm. And you wonder where the cookie will crumble with that. But I think you're right. There's a lot of superficialness in the last few years in these platforms.
Yeah, it's less about what you say and more about how you present it. So I think that's going to change,
Right.
Especially with people getting off of social media, being outside more, doing more things, and being able to get out and to go back to normal life. Or it may become ubiquitous. I don't know.
I think you're right. The next like 12, 18 months will be interesting to see how that's going to shake up. Cause you're right. It's going to be this sense of freedom, and what's that going to mean?
Yeah.
So where do you see you talked about like you have parts of an EP done. Where do you kind of see your sound for you, like for your band as well? Like where do you see things going for you next?
I mean, the thing for me is I'm going to be doing music no matter what. It's like, I'm still going to be an engineer. I'm going to, make money doing that as save and everything like normal. But for every day that I put into engineering and stuff like that, I want to put in a day on my music. And I think even if nobody listens, I'm still going to put out music. And that's the key. I think that's I'm not doing it because I want to be successful. I'm doing it because I that's what I need to do. I need to put out music. But I do believe that that's the most successful route. Do it because then like soon it'll work itself out. The universe provides if you provide for it.
Mm-hmm.
And at least that's what I think I'm going to do. And as for like my sound, I mean, this next EP is a lot more, I want to say, live instruments. I worked with this guy from Ghana. He's like a ridiculous producer called HK Sensei.
Wow.
He made this one beat. I'm debating whether or not to put this one out first or California. I want to do California, but I need to finish the video. But I have a song called Bad Enough, which is like this ridiculous like trap. It's like a sample thing, but it's groovy because then I brought guitar in and I made it almost like funk. You'll see when it comes out. But
yeah,
at this point, like I'm just gonna keep putting music out when I can afford to. Like I'm already paying for my distribution. Everything is all mine. So I kind of just save like 10% of my paycheck in general, but I save another 10% towards my music. So as soon as I hit like a certain amount, then I'm going to go record the music video for California, because I think you need to put at least 10% of the amount of time you put on the music into promotion. So yeah.
I think that's great. I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah, man. I'll send you demos. Just don't leak them.
You're good. I'm so used to have my brother. He's always like, "Don't tell." I'm like, "Okay, deal, got it."
my 91 listeners this past week will like go nuts.
Hey, everybody counts. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
So, all right, we always do like this. I've kind of hybrid. It used to be 3, but I feel like one question kind of drills this home for like the last big question. If somebody's out there going to be a musician, artist, anything in that field, what are like 3 to 5 pieces of advice you would give to somebody just starting out in music?
Okay. I'll try to keep it simple. Number 1, try to get what you need to be self-sustainable. I have a lot of artists that hit me up and they want me to like work with them and like do music with them and stuff, but they can't record their own vocals. They can't record their own guitar. It's expensive. I know it's fucking annoying. Do it. Because all of the gear that I've had, that I've amassed over years of just like wasting money on what I thought were toys, has come back tenfold. I use this stuff all the time. My interface, my little $200 interface I have here, my Motu M2, is fucking fantastic. And it's worth it because I can plug a microphone into it. I can, plug my guitar into it. I can do, as long as it's like 1 or 2 inputs, I got it right here. I have a board over here that I run shit through that's like 12 inputs and like 4 outputs, and like just having those tools, is ideal. You have to be self-sustainable, but that doesn't mean go buy shit that you don't need. I say every artist needs a microphone, a guitar, a piano, or like a MIDI piano, an interface, and cables. Like have those things, become self-sustainable, and learn the basics of recording. Once you have that, then you can go on to number 2. And I think number 2 would be continually produce, continually make things. Even if it sucks, save it, revisit it a few years later or like a few months. Depends on what your process is. I find shit that I wrote like 6 years ago and I'm like, oh fuck, that was fire. And I like want to play with it. 3, social media is a bitch, but it is your friend and a tool. It's free promotion. Everything is free. Don't overuse it, but use social media. And a tip with that, start looking at circles. Don't look at people. One thing that I've done a lot, and like how I've like reached out to artists and like I've gotten around, is finding the circles that these artists work out of. So like I worked with Kamasi Washington for a minute, huge name in jazz. I actually mixed the final episode of Homeland with him.
Wow.
So like,
okay.
So that was a huge deal. I got to do that on like this ridiculous board. But knowing him and those people and like becoming friends with them, I met another like group of jazz musicians recently, and I was like, oh yeah, I worked with Kamasi. Like, oh yeah, I know Kamasi. And then those small world moments really help keep you cohesive in the thing. So when you're on social media, look at who they follow. look who they interact with, start to try and understand their friend group. And it sounds really really shady and sketchy, but this is like one of the things that helped me understand how the industry worked. Once you see like who they interact with most, how and why they do, then if you ever run into them in person or whatever, and you know somebody that they know, you can be like, hey, I saw that you were friends with so and so. So like I know Ronald Bruner Jr., Thundercat's brother, the drummer from Kamasi.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
I ran into him at jazz night at the Federal because my girlfriend was doing a show upstairs. Go figure. So I went downstairs because I heard jazz. I was like, oh shit. Ronald Bruner Jr. was there, and I know him from a whole bunch of shit because he played with like punk bands like Suicidal Tendencies, I think. I
Okay.
was like, oh fuck, that's him, you know? So I talked to him after. I was like, hey, you know, I know you're A2 when you tour with Kamasi. And he's like, oh yeah, Mike, the guy with the tooth. I'm like, yeah, Mike, the dude with the tooth. Mike is the guy that runs the studio I told you about earlier.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So like
Yeah.
that's that small world shit. And then I started working with Kamasi more, and because I knew everybody, they became more comfortable. So it's like it is a lot of schmoozing, but be real, be yourself, see who you become friends with, and just provide what you provide. And then knowing those circles will truly help you navigate the system. For really get a hold of yourself. It's always a process. I'm still working on it myself, but get a hold of yourself. Like, know who you are, believe in yourself. Don't go to people, don't go to artists and be like, well, I think I wrote a good song. Don't do that shit. Be yourself. And if they're interested in hearing your music, it'll happen. And be like, yeah, I think the song's pretty good. You know, like give your actual thoughts and be proud of yourself, but don't be overconfident, you know?
Right.
You have every right to be proud of what you've done, but also like go into everything like trying to learn. And yeah, I think those are like the four main things. Be self-sufficient, handle yourself, learn how like these circles work, and the other one that I'm forgetting right now.
No, that's some solid advice though. It really is.
I'm glad I'm glad you asked, because it's like it's kind of like now that I know, now I have all this information that feels useless sometimes. Like in conversation, I can't just like I'm hanging out with my girlfriend and like some friends. I can't just be like, okay, so like I found this thing, and like when you deal with like masters and licensing, if you go like this or you do that, like that, this shit doesn't land. So like it's so nice to talk about this shit, you know?
Oh, definitely. This is great. And I always tell any guest, but it's true, like the floor is always open. So like because one thing I think I'm gonna try and incorporate a little more now too is like having people back on, but may not like obviously you'd be like, hey, how's things in your life? But
Mhm.
almost talk about like, all right, X, Y, and Z happened in like the music world. What do you feel about that? And I think adding
Mhm.
that like discussion or consider debate almost like is a cool aspect too. So you're always welcome for that also.
Dude, I would gladly come back. This is a ton of fun. I really appreciate you having me, like, giving me a place to talk about my music and like just be able to share the knowledge that I've gained is like immense to me. That's like that's what it is for me. Is I want to help people, and like I'm not even at like that high of a level. I'm just like
Mhm.
at the front door, and I'm just like,
Right.
yo, dude, this is what I'm seeing. Check it out. You know, it's if I can look at the list at the door and help other people get into the swingers club, I'm gonna do
That is
it.
goddamn full circle. Jordy, before we like jet, and I want to talk to you a little bit in post if you have a minute, is
Sure.
how can people find more about you and your music, social, obviously your band, kind of
Mhm.
fill just sort of that stuff. I'll have it in the description, but just letting them know vocally.
Sure. You can find me almost anywhere as Jordy the Blonde. Um, on Instagram, it's like, all those things, no spaces, no captions, Jordy the Blonde. You'll find me. Um, you can find my music, Jordy the Blonde. It's pretty straightforward. Atticus Finch was my pop punk band. Still is my pop punk band. They're based out of upstate New York. So if you want to find them, it's Atticus Finch CNY. Um, yeah, I mean that's basically it. If you ever want to get in contact with me, like all my info is out there. I'm always open to talking to people, working with them and helping them in any way. I want to help. That's my thing. I want to if I can teach you anything, if there's all this stupid fucking shit I have in my head is worthwhile to anybody, that's the key. So yeah, Jordy the Blonde everywhere. new EP soon, someday, when I finally put out California.
Yeah.
Live version Attention is going to drop someday. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on, dude. It was a pleasure. And it was awesome being able to share all my shit with you.
Yeah, this was amazing. Sometimes going into interview, like you have a little bit of like learning, but you don't know what the conversation is going to be. And this is up there for all my favorites. This is so much fun. I love this type of conversation. So
man, I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And just, I'll probably actually hit you up too. We'll get you a shirt.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, Wingman of the Year, Streaming Cassettes. We'll get you some stuff. But
hell yeah.
Of course. But hey, everyone watching, check him out. Jordy the Blond. Just solid fucking dude. I just love being solid people. That's what's great about this. You're talking on mic, and then the world, you know what? It is a little like soapbox and all ended. But the thing is that the world you see out there's a lot of rough shit, right? You were saying that. Like the world is going to be against you, but that doesn't mean everything is. And there's so many good fucking people out there. And as long as you're true to yourself and you actually have something you believe in, it could be being a scientist, swinger, whatever. You be you. And I think a lot of it will work out, honestly. So that's what I've learned from just standing here in this mic in this like 10 by 10 spare bedroom in my house. So, but Jordy, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. And Streaming Cassettes, go to Wingman of the Year. Your shows, their blogs, their merch. You know what it is. All right. Sign out. Peace.